In this video we'll be looking a little bit more deeply into the phenomena that is Mercury retrograde. So first of all, what is a retrograde period? Because obviously no planet can actually go backwards. That would cause cataclysm across our solar system. So if you imagine you are in the middle lane of a motorway and you're going faster than the car on the outside lane, that car will seem to be going backwards. So nothing's actually going backwards, it's just there's moments when one planet will take over another one, and therefore that planet will seem to be going in a backwards motion. And this actually has an impact on the electromagnetic fields and how they interact with each other, and therefore the aspects normally given to that planet will seem to reverse themselves, if that makes sense. So Mercury, as we already know, is the planet of inspiration, thought and memory. And thought and memory are housed outside of the brain in collective fields. Morphogenic fields is what they're called. So when we think, we're tuning into thought forms, mostly collective, unless we're the master of our own mind, in which case we can then choose which thought forms we are actively going to go and link with. So we're tuning into thought forms, processing through the brain, outputting through the mouth and the hands in words and action. So that's the normal role of Mercury, which is rational, processing, thought and action. So when Mercury goes retrograde, it's almost like we've switched hemispheres of the brain, because our left brain is the rational, logical, processing brain. But when Mercury seemingly goes backwards in the sky, has a more internal, retrospective feel to it, as its field correlates with that of Earth, then we're almost swimming around in that right brain. We're looking at the irrational, the psychic. 95% of what goes on frequency levels goes on outside of our audio and visual range. So we rely so heavily on touch and taste and smell, sight and sound. But most 95% goes on outside of those spheres. So when we're in the right brain, we're tuned in psychically, we're working with our instinct and our intuition and our cellular memory and our 95%, our other self, our bigger self, and our self which is connected with everything that is. We're not relying on the heavily rational. So when Mercury goes retrograde, we're swimming around in those waters. So one of the great things that you can do at this time is get deep, get psychic, get connected and get over your senses and into the other realms. So this is a wonderful period, normally about 3 to 4 weeks, 3 times a year. Wonderful period for you to actually tune in, feel, sense, intuit, possibly do some retrogressive work, so maybe past life work or going back and healing parts of your past, because it's a good time to actually go backwards and have a look at something that may have happened in the past that still has some kind of impact on what's going on today. What we can see quite often during a Mercury retrograde is this will be played out by people coming back into your life from the past, or people really reminding you of something that you went through in the past. So we can either link up with ex-lovers or old school friends, have kind of actual physical reunions, or a situation can come up that makes you feel similar to something that happened a long time ago and has a time echo going backwards. And if you go backwards right to the source of that feeling, then quite often this is a very healing opportunity to go back, to relive it, to see where you've misunderstood it, to see where you're carrying dead weight forwards that could have just been left, or was perceived wrongly at the time, or has actually served its purpose, and you can put down those heavy emotional baggages and walk forwards more lightly. So when Mercury actually goes into a sign before it retrogrades, this is like phase 1. It goes into the sign and it begins to work its magic. We begin to feel and think and intuit through that sign. Then Mercury turns and goes seemingly backwards. It's think more internally. It goes inside and can often be reminiscent of things that have gone on in the past. It's that kind of a backwards inside of us. So the second leg is to go back, revise, review. Retrospective means spectre is to see, so to re-see. And quite often we've carried things forwards that aren't true, that were perceived wrongly at the time. So we go back, we revise, we review, we generally remind and remember taking ourselves all the way back to get a grip of what is serving us going forwards and what can be left behind. And people can come up in our lives, or we can be reminded of situations, those time echoes, those cellular memories that come back at this time to help us clear those bits of our programming. So when Mercury goes retrograde, all of those retro, anything that begins with RE, if you're revising for exams, that's absolutely fine too, because it's really good to go back over your notes and see what's gone before and remind yourself of what you've already learnt. So exams is a really good time for Mercury retrograde. It's not a great time to sign contracts classically or to buy things with moving parts. Mercury is the planet which is most connected to things with moving parts, like cars, because Mercury is the planet that travels quickest around the sun, so it's got this link with fast travel. So cars and bicycles can break down, or not a good time to buy them because there might be something about them that's not quite right. Mercury also rules money, so we can make some very bad financial decisions at this time that we later regret, whether it's actual earnings or spendings. Really, there can be some bad shopping decisions as well as some bad contracts and work decisions made. So it's always said check the small print if you do have to make a decision, because we can't put our lives on hold. But if you can avoid those times altogether, then that's a really good idea to just kind of wait until the retrograde period is over, because in the second leg we're going backwards. When Mercury turns direct again on the third leg, that's when we're more likely to be older, wiser, to have learnt the lessons. If we've done the going back, then we can step forwards higher up or further on. So that third leg has got kind of older and wiser, and we get the point of it all later on. So leg 1 is when Mercury goes into the sign, leg 2 is when it retrogrades backwards or inwards, and leg 3 is when it turns direct and goes forwards again. So if you can work on a 1, 2, 3 level, see what comes up on leg 1, revise it on leg 2, and then get the point and move on leg 3. And this is really how to work with the retrograde without it just seeming like there's chaos around. So we've got transport, we've got money, we've got thinking with the other hemisphere of the brain. There's a lot of interesting communication that goes on. People tend to kind of speak before they think, so quite often it's really worth remembering that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so to work with that ratio. But also quite often we can overhear things, or people can say things that they may not have meant to say, and things can come out of the darkness and be brought to light, so secrets, gossip, things like that. So trying to think first and speak later if you don't want to offend people, but you may be on the receiving end of a piece of information that you might not have otherwise been privy to coming to light. So there's always a reason for it. We need to be a bit philosophical, and it's always worth having a sense of humour handy when Mercury goes retrograde, because Mercury is a funny sign, it's a funny planet rather, rules Gemini, and it's quite cheeky, and everything does happen for a reason. So these reunions, these meetings, these remembrances, and also these miscommunications can all actually be quite good for us in a way, so it's worth staying light and philosophical and not taking anything too personally. So that's it. That's the Mercury retrograde and how to work with it to better effect. Try doing things differently. It's always worth taking a different route to work, or a different bus, or if you miss your bus or your car does break down, again, that can be that kind of sliding doors opportunity to do something differently. And if you have got the bus, you would never have bumped into that old friend who then invited you to that party where you met your wife or husband. Do you see what I mean? So it's that kind of the chance for things to happen differently, the chance for those parallel lives to converge, and for different opportunities to open up. So in a way, it's worth just really enjoying it, see what happens. And the only times that we really get upset is when we're too dogged and too mentally focused on having things our way. I have to get there by this time. So try and allow a little bit more time when you're travelling, or I have to get this contract in by then. We'll try and get it done a little bit earlier so that you're not rushing at the last minute. Those are the times when people really do struggle, when they're desperately trying to get something done and there's no flexibility in it. So Mercury is all about flexibility as it turns from solid to liquid and back again. So keep a sense of humour handy, stay flexible, have a look at what happens because there's some meaning behind it, and be prepared to go inwards, backwards, and deal with things from the past so that you can walk forwards fresher, lighter and wiser at the end of it.